Imagine this. You're sitting in a meeting. Your heart, it's pounding. Your palms sweating. You're intently staring at that blank notebook of yours. And you're silently praying that no one calls on you to speak. If you've ever had that kind of experience before, give me a thumbs up or a yay on the chat. Now, that used to be my experience in almost every meeting. I used to work in investment banking, and being the extreme introvert that I was, I mastered avoiding eye contact. I was the Harry Houdini of corporate meetings. I could disappear. I could be invisible amongst people. And guess how my presentations were? They acquired a reputation for curing insomnia. And I could see it every time I started speaking in a room. People fidgeting, looking ahead in the deck. Within 2 minutes, I would lose the room. And this started affecting my career. In fact, I lost a huge promotion just because I couldn't deliver my vision with authority and presence. The same thing happened. A room with 6 men in suits, but within minutes, again, their eyes were glazed. So that led me to wonder, why do we stop listening to some speakers? What is it that makes us stop listening to some speakers immediately, virtually within seconds of them starting to speak? I used to think it was a personality issue. I was quiet, reserved, shy even, and very introverted. Whereas the speakers who caught attention, to my eye, they were extroverted, loud, and had a very strong personality. So I thought, like, am I doomed? Will I ever be, will I ever have the authority on stage? Will people ever listen to me? And that led me on a journey of figuring out how to improve my own speaking, watching other speakers. And I discovered that it's not a personality issue at all. It's not about being loud. In fact, when we speak on stage, the audience picks up certain signals, sometimes unconsciously, that the speaker gives out, sometimes within seconds, within moments of them starting to speak. And these signals determine whether a speaker will be listened to, whether a speaker will have authority, whether a speaker will have presence, or they'll be forgotten. They will not be heard at all. And these signals, they come in four major categories. There are four types of authority signals, which we are going to look at in the next 40 minutes. The first category is cognitive signal. It's how your words reveal the way you think, the thought that you put in, your knowledge. Those are cognitive signals, perhaps the most important in whether a speaker will have presence, will have authority. The second one is how your body is coordinated with what you speak. Your body reveals a lot more than you think it is. And it says even before you speak. So the second category of signals are physical signals. The third category is your voice. We all know how big an impact voice has on whether the audience is engaged. Similarly, on authority and presence, your tone, your inflections, they have a remarkable effect on whether the audience will listen to you or not. And finally, energy. We tend to think that the most charismatic and speakers have high energy all the time. But you will learn that it's not as straightforward. It's about how you manage your energy and how it goes with your content and what you say. So those are the four major categories of signals. But within each category, I learned that there are one or two signals which have a disproportionate effect on a speaker's presence on stage. And over the next 35 minutes, you will pick up those four signals, the ones that I wish I knew when I stepped into that room for my promotion. These are the four tools that will make people want to listen to you and stop looking at their phones. And four tools that will make you be remembered after you've spoken, even if you have been the quietest person in the room till then. So that's what we are going to do in the next half an hour or so, starting with the first signal, which is a cognitive signal. And this is a signal, the value of which I learned the really hard way. At the beginning of my career, I used to work as a management consultant at a big consulting firm called McKinsey. And this project was with an Indian manufacturing client. I was a junior consultant, and my job was to figure out whether this client should start sourcing components from China. Now, I had worked for months, probably, yeah, few months on this topic. I read countless research reports. I spoke to so many experts. I built Excel models. I knew everything there was to know about this topic. In fact, if you woke me up at 3 in the morning and asked me, so Andy, what do you think about Chinese wheel loaders? I would have told you immediately. Chinese wheel loaders have a much better value proposition than Japanese wheel loaders. They are 30% cheaper and provide almost the same quality. Chinese wheel loaders are the best thing on earth. And I would have done that. But then there was a meeting with a senior partner who was a big shot in that firm, which was very rare because it is usually just the managers and us juniors. And in that meeting, that partner asked me, so Andy, what do you think? Should our client source from China? And in that moment, I did what any well prepared, thoughtful, well researched consultant should do. I rambled. Yeah, China. That is a very interesting question. I've been looking at the data. Yeah. But the cost advantage is very real. But the supply chain is quite complex, and I was talking to Rahul about it, and yeah, the exchange rate also, maybe that's an issue because you cannot fix it. But yeah, I think on the whole, maybe China, yeah, the client should start sourcing from China. The partner looked at me and said, "Aha," just two words. But in his eyes, he said, "What is this idiot doing in my team?" But then, to my surprise, he turned to my colleague, Karan, and asked him the same question. Now, Karan knew absolutely nothing about this. He was working on a completely different work stream. All he knew about China and sourcing were the short weekly updates that I gave to the manager and the rest of the team. And I could see the shock in his eyes. His face looked ashen. He was frozen and he wasn't saying anything for maybe like 3, 4, 5 seconds. I thought the poor guy is having a heart attack. And I was enjoying that bit of Schadenfreude because of after my terrible performance itself. But then Karan spoke and he said, yes, they should source from China. The primary reason is cost. Sourcing from China can reduce their input costs by 30 to 40% in the first year itself, which directly addresses the margin pressures they are currently facing. We've seen evidence of that in the automotive sector, where first year costs went down by 35%. So, yes, at this stage, for this client, China is the right move. The partner looked at him and just nodded. A nod that meant, I respect you. If you were in the room with me, you would have seen me desperately trying to put a smile on my face, but internally I was drowning in self loathing. Now, who came across as the more credible person over there, the one with the knowledge and the one who had his thinking sorted out? Was it me who knew everything about the topic, or was it Karan, who didn't know much, but he came out and sounded very organized? It was Karan, right? The partner didn't know the work that I'd put in, the spreadsheets I'd built, and the interviews I'd taken. All he heard was someone who was just trying to think out loud and someone who had his thinking sorted out. The reason was Karan sounded organized. And when you sound organized, you sound in charge. When you sound organized, you sound in charge. So the first rule, the first signal that gives someone authority is structure in how they speak, being organized. Because when you sound organized, you sound in charge. That's your number one signal for authority on stage. Now, how did Karan sound so organized? He didn't just make it up on the spot. He used a specific structure. So let's decode what he did when the partner asked him that completely unexpected question. The first thing that he did, and which I thought was he was having a heart attack, was he took a pause. 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, I don't recall how long, but he took that pause. That pause allowed him to load his thoughts and think, okay, hang on, I know this, I can put this together. And that pause is absolutely critical when you're faced in a situation like this. Then what did he do? He started by saying, yes, they should source from China. That's his main point. He led with the point. He gave the answer straight away. Not like me going around taking the circuitous route, the scenic route, seeing this caveat, that caveat. Gave the point straight away. But he didn't just stop there. He gave a reason. Cost. Sourcing from China can reduce their cost by 30-40%. And to back it up, he gave an example or evidence. See, it works in the automotive sector. And finally, he reiterated his point again. So, point, reason, example, point. This is a simple structure you can use when you're asked a question which requires a clear opinion one way or the other. And it's called prep. So the technique that he used is called pause and prep. That pause is absolutely critical because the pause allows you to put together the prep in place. The prep is not the only structure that you can use. Prep is for a very specific purpose when there is a clear opinion. There are many other structures that are applicable in other situations. But the point is, be prepared, be sound organized. Because when you sound organized, you sound in charge. When you sound like you know what you're going to say, people are going to listen to you. If you are come across as a person who's just thinking aloud, not sure, then you lose authority. So that's your first signal, the cognitive signal, and perhaps the most important one, structure. Because when you sound organized, you sound in charge. And a technique to practice that is pause and prep. Pause is critical in all these situations, and prep, point, reason, example, point, is a technique that you can use for impromptu questions which require an opinion. Pause and prep, structure. Now you practice this, and every time you speak, you sound very structured, very organized. So that gives you presence. But what you're doing with your body might just undermine what you're trying to convey with the actual words. Let me give you an example, and this is how I used to speak when I started out. We need to increase our sales by 30-40% in the next 1 year. Versus, we need to increase our sales by 30 to 40% in the next 1 year. What was the difference between the two versions? In the first one, I was moving quite a bit, unintended movement in my body. It happens when you're trying to portray energy or you are unaware of your body's unconscious, unintentional moves or takes. In the second one, I was deliberately still and I moved only what I wanted to move, my hands, little bit my face. Because when you have unintentional movement, it distracts the audience from what you're trying to say, your message. But when you are still and every move is controlled, it's deliberate, then there is nothing that comes in between the words that you're saying and your body and the audience. So the audience listens to you. That's why the second signal of authority is stillness. Stillness is what authority looks like in physical form. Because when you stop moving, they start listening. When you stop moving, they start listening. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, wait, I've been told to move as a speaker on stage all the time. Does that mean I now need to stay rooted in one spot? No, it means that every movement should have purpose. We tend to confuse movement with energy. Yes, movement can bring energy when it is controlled and it's intentional. That brings dynamism. But more importantly, movement should have other uses. For instance, you have made a point and you want to make another point, move to another part of the stage. You're telling a story and something happens, the scene changes in the story. You talk to your boss, now you want to talk to your wife, so you move. Sometimes you move to show a different timeline. And yes, sometimes you move to engage with the audience. But what I'm talking about here is unintentional movement. On stage, almost all of us are nervous. And when we are nervous, our body starts doing different things that we don't even know. And on top of that, we've been told that I can't stay still. I have to move. That's what a good presenter, a good speaker does. So you are randomly pacing around, your body was doing all sorts of things, and the audience can't just latch on to what you're saying. So that's why you can move and you should move if your speech demands it, but always deliberate and with purpose. That answers the question, when do I move? Now, how do I practice this? It's all good, well and good to say stillness, be stillness. Now, this is a technique that I often use, especially at the beginning of my speech. I call it plant, pause, punch. So when I start my speech, I like my feet grounded and a little bit wide. That gives me stability. So that's my plant. And then I take a moment to see if there are any movements in my body, any unintentional movements because I'm nervous on stage. And the first few times I did this exercise, I was surprised to learn that I move from side to side. My hands do a little bit of movement, completely unintentional. And all those subtle, small movements, even if the audience is not explicitly picking up on them, unconsciously undermine your authority. So, this plant and pause give you that opportunity to assess what your body was doing. And then you punch. Once you're grounded, you've taken the pause, you're sure that your body is still, then you make your point, then you start your speech, then you move to a different, then you make your statement, your conclusion. And that comes across as a whole new kind of authority and magnetism on stage. So that's the second signal, stillness. Because when you stop moving, they start listening. The first signal that we saw was a cognitive signal, structure, because structure helps you sound organized. And when you sound organized, you sound in charge. And the second signal was a physical signal, stillness, because when you stop moving, they start listening. Now you now sound very structured. You sound like someone who has their thinking all sorted out, and your movements are all deliberate, very controlled. And this will give you maybe take you to 70-80% of of the authority that you want as a speaker. But there is something that we do with our voices sometimes that undermines again the gravity or the seriousness or our authority of our statements. Let me give you an example. We should move forward with this strategy versus we should move forward with this strategy. We should move forward with this strategy. We should move forward with this strategy. In the first one, I ended on an upward inflection. And the second one, I ended on a downward inflection. The first one, as a result, sounded like I'm asking for permission. Whereas the second one sounded like I've made up my mind and I'm stating my conclusion. This is what it is. This is what I believe. And guess what? People don't follow those who are asking for permission. They follow those who know what they are talking about and who have opinions that they can back them up. So, the third signal, the vocal signal, is gravity. Because when your voice goes down, your credibility goes up. When your voice goes down, your credibility goes up. So when do we tend to do this? In day-to-day conversation, we normally don't do this. You're not talking to your wife and it's not ending on an upward inflection. Or maybe it does, I don't know. Where you don't walk into a Starbucks or say, I'll have a flat white. But when the stakes are high and you're nervous, suddenly the sentences start ending on an upward inflection. And to the audience, comes across as if you are unsure. And being unsure, being uncertain, completely kills your authority. I found this out the hard way in the worst possible situation. I had a startup going, and after months of trying, I had set up a meeting with a VC, a venture capitalist firm. I'd prepared for weeks for that. I knew everything I wanted to say, the spreadsheets, the models, same. And in that presentation, in that pitch, one of the senior investors, he asked me, so how many users you think you'll get in the first year? I knew that number. Obviously, I had modeled it myself. But in that moment, I wasn't sure. Should I say, so will it be too high? Will it be too low? I mean, I was unsure. So my answer came out as, we can get 100,000 users. And the investor said, you don't seem very confident. He wasn't doubting my numbers, or he wasn't asking me to give me a reason how I'll get there. He just said, you don't sound very confident. At the end of that pitch, my co-founder said, you know that thing you did with your voice? You did that 3 times. I said, really? I didn't even realize that. But that's the worst thing. Without you even realizing, it kills your authority. So the important signal is gravity, because when your voice goes down, your credibility goes up. But that raises the question, does that mean I should never use upward inflections? Of course not. You have to use, for instance, when you're asking a question. But even other than that, when you are matching somebody, when you agree with somebody, when you want to show enthusiasm, you end on an upward inflection, because that gives warmth, that gives that okay, yeah, I'm happy to meet you. You don't say, so nice to meet you. You don't do that, right? Not very happy to meet them. It's so nice to meet you. So that brings that happiness, that enthusiasm. So the rule is, when you are receiving something from someone, that somebody has said a point and you want to agree and with them, or you want to show your happiness, your energy, then you can finish on upward inflections. But when you're making a statement, giving an opinion, and you want it to be heard, you want to make sure that your opinion counts, the statement lands, then you finish on a downward inflection. Because when your voice goes down, your credibility goes up. So, how do you practice this? It's a simple technique that I call land and let it sit. Now, in your speech, there will be a few key statements. There won't be like, there will be 50, 60 of them. There will be a few key statements in that speech or presentation. Identify those and mark the last word of those sentences. That's where you must land, on a downward note. And a trick to do that is to just nod slightly once you get to that word. Not a big bow, or not like a huge nod, but just a slight nod. We should move forward with this strategy. It automatically will lower your inflection. So that's the first step. Land your voice on that last word of your key statements. And then I say, let it sit. You have just made what to you is an important point, the key message, the core statement. Pause. Let that word, let that gravity hang in the air. Resist the temptation to move on to the next point or to fill it up with a random filler word. Because when you pause that with and you've ended that statement with gravity on a downward note, then the audience absorbs that message and they feel your presence on stage. So that's our third signal, gravity. So our first signal was a cognitive signal, which is structured. When we speak, we should sound organized, because when you sound organized, you sound in charge. Our body should stay still and every movement should be deliberate, because when you stop moving, they start listening. And when we make our key points and key statements, our opinions, our voice should go down. Because when your voice goes down, your credibility goes up. Now, this final signal is an energy signal. And this signal probably could be the difference between you being a speaker who is listened to and one who is remembered. And I'll demonstrate with an example what I mean. I used to use highlighters quite a lot when I used to study in college and university days. And I would read something and I would see, okay, this is a very insightful quote. Okay. Oh, important stat. Okay, a formula. I need to remember this. Okay, a very good summary. Okay, right. And then I'll go. By the time I've reached the end of the page, my page looked like this. I would end up highlighting 80% of the speech, of the text. Now, what happens when you highlight 80%? What are you actually highlighting? You're highlighting nothing because you've highlighted everything. Now, when you speak or present, your energy and the emphasis you put on certain words, certain sentences is your highlighter. If you are on a high energy throughout or a low energy throughout, which is even worse, then every part of your speech gets the same emphasis. Your key message has the same energy and emphasis as your transitions and fillers. And the audience doesn't pick up, okay, what's important here? What do I need to remember? What is the message? What is the core point? Because you're highlighting everything, so nothing gets highlighted. But when you highlight selectively by strategically managing your energy and focusing on those points which you want the audience to take away, where you want the audience to be really engaged, and bringing up your energy or changing your emphasis, changing your voice, changing your body, changing your gestures at those points, then you highlight the parts that they really need to remember. Because in doing so, what you create is contrast. And contrast is the fourth major signal. Contrast is what makes makes a speech memorable. Because when you control the contrast, you control the room. When you control the contrast, you control the room. But if you keep on speaking at the same energy, same emphasis throughout, especially if you're high energy, then two things will happen. First, the audience will not get what you're saying, they'll not remember the specific points. And secondly, for people like me, naturally quiet, slightly low energy, will burn out, trying to pace the stage, trying to be high energy, looking like monkeys on steroids, which somebody told me as feedback once I tried to do that. But when you manage your energy strategically, giving that emphasis on key points, then those points get remembered. And the technique that I do for this one is called mark and lift. Again, similar to land and let it sit, identify those parts in your speech where you really want to be memorable, really want the audience to take away. Mark those. And once you get to those, lift your energy. Do something different, either through your voice or your gestures, your volume, something that makes the audience sit up and take note. So 90% of the time, you will be at baseline energy. Now, baseline doesn't mean that you're just talking to a friend casually. Hey, how are you? Very nice to see you. How are things? No, you are presenting. So your baseline is already a bit elevated, as if you're talking to a friend who is standing 10, 15 feet away. You're still more animated than usual. But once you get to the points that you've marked, you need to do more and lift. Let me give you an example. It sounds very ordinary, you're speaking normally, but then you get to this point, and this is where the change happens. So you take notice because I changed something in my voice. I wasn't doing the same low energy, normal baseline. I increased my volume, I increased emphasis. So that's what you get when you do mark and lift. You are able to create contrast in your speech. And when you control the contrast, you control the room. You become memorable. So those are our four signals that we learned. First one, a cognitive signal, structure, being organized. Because when you sound organized, you sound in charge. And one technique that we learned to master it was pause and prep. The second type of signal was a physical signal, stillness, moving deliberately. Because when you stop moving, they start listening. And the technique that we learn to be able to still is plant, pause, punch. The third signal was a vocal signal. We learned that our voice must go down when we say key points, because when your voice goes down, your credibility goes up. And the technique that we learned was land and let it sit. And finally, an energy signal to create contrast in your speech, because contrast makes you memorable. And when you control the contrast, you control the room. The technique to create contrast is mark and lift. So which one signal do you think you'll take into the next meeting with you? Think about it and write it down and commit to it. Okay, this has resonated with me and I will practice this in my next meeting. Don't try to do all of them together because it's too much to put in at one go. So pick one signal, take it into the next meeting and watch what happens, gather feedback, and then start layering on these signals. You already have the authority. Now you just need to go and speak so the room listens. Now, before I end, there is a handout that I want to give out, which is a summary of whatever I have said in this presentation. It's a nice, concise PDF that you can get from this link. If you scan this QR code, You can also email me with your thoughts, how you felt the speech went, this presentation, was it useful or not? And that's my website as well. But thank you.